All right. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Aidan and I'm a youth activist from Owen Sound,
Okay.
here in Owen Sound. So I started about a year ago doing the Fridays for Future
Okay.
activism.
Forest for Future?
Fridays
for Future.
Yes.
Okay.
But then shortly after the pandemic hit and we had to go online and we did some town halls.
Okay.
I think maybe you knew about it. I interviewed John Tamming and Liz Zetlin.
Oh yeah, that's
in the
I
spring,
think
and
I.
then,
Well, I saw the links anyways.
yeah, and I did some other town hall summit like that in a Zoom format so that people could stay connected.
Yeah.
But during the past while, then my family started researching into the pandemic, and because it seemed like it wasn't adding up.
Yeah.
And at first, what I thought is that the lockdown was a good thing, and that it was showing that the government can respond to a crisis like climate change, and that's what I talked about in some of my town halls. But what seemed wrong was that the government doesn't seem to normally care about health. They haven't banned the advertising for junk food. They haven't.
The only other health measure they've done is fluoride, which is known as a neurotoxin, which kills brain cells. It's like, well, that's not actually caring about people's health.
No.
From my understanding, the history was that fluoride was an industrial byproduct, and they were having trouble getting rid of it because they couldn't dump it, and there was nowhere else they could do anything else they could do with it. And they're like, let's just put it in the tap water. And,
oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't.
And so they're like, yeah, because people with fluoridosis, where their teeth are falling apart from too much fluoride, they don't get cavities. So they were like, oh, let's do that. So fluoride also makes your teeth and bones more brittle. So it makes it more likely that your teeth will chip, and then you need those enamels and replacement teeth and stuff. But it does lower your likelihood of getting cavities, and it does also make your bones more fragile, increase your risk of osteoporosis and neurodegenerative diseases. But anyway, so you go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I think that the fluoride in the water is not a good thing.
No.
But we actually did do a little bit of protesting when they had that vote for whether they wanted it in the city.
I remember. Yeah, that was so unfair. They basically said, no, the anti-fluoride people aren't allowed to have any promotional material because they're not running a campaign as a politician. But the pro-fluoride people were allowed to do it because it was all the businesses and all of the medical facilities had pro-fluoride.
Yes, I think it was some filing issue, like they had to file something by a certain time if they were going to campaign and do that, and they didn't tell the anti-fluoride groups about it.
I think it was they got disqualified on a technicality, basically. Like, it wasn't a legitimate reason. They just they were like, how can we give them a hard time? Let's look through all of the possible legislation and claim that this is a legitimate reason. I don't think it was a legitimate reason, personally, but whatever. What's done is done. Yeah. Have you seen Plandemic?
Yes, I watched
one?
Plandemic and Plandemic 2.
Yeah,
yes.
So like that seems like totally legit to me. I don't know.
Well, I'm actually reading Judy Mikovits' book now. That she was the one featured in the first series, the first movie, and she wrote a book called Plague of Corruption. And I bought that book and I'm reading through it now. And
cool.
I think you see a lot about in the forward how there's a lot of scientists before like her that sometimes question some of the ingredients in the vaccines or some of the what was going into it, but they they were told they couldn't tell the public or they were fired.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. Yeah, it's from my understanding, it's all related to the plutocrats that own the world, like the Federal Reserve. All of the interest is getting paid to someone, and those someones are some secret banking families. Well, they're not so secret. Like, it's presumed that they are the J.P. Morgan, Rockefellers, possibly the Rothschilds. So the Rothschilds are mostly Europe and Asia kind of thing. They also own the IMF. And so you're familiar with the Bilderberg Group?
Well, actually, yeah. Just yesterday we looked it up, and it's interesting how many different influential people that go to those meetings. I looked at the list with my father.
Facebook and Google and all of the major news media all go to the Bilderberg meetings.
Yes, and then the Trilateral Commission we looked at as well.
I've heard of the Trilateral Commission, but it's
founded
not
by David Rockefeller.
It's also founded by David Rockefeller?
Yeah.
I heard that, was the Trilateral Commission supposed to be in Asia?
No, I think it's to foster communications between Asia and North America and Europe.
Because I heard they had a falling out with the Asian people. I don't know if it's current, if it's ongoing, but basically they had a falling out because the Asian people were like, hey, you're just telling us, you're not actually involving us in this process.
Yeah, well, I just looked at yesterday. I'm not familiar too much with it,
okay.
but I also followed the Corbett report.
The Colbert Report?
Yes, he has a lot of documentaries.
Corbett Report? It was different, right?
James Corbett?
James Corbett, yeah.
So he's done a lot of documentaries, and he has one about Bill Gates.
Yeah.
Have you watched that one?
Yeah. Just zooming back a little bit to the Trilateral Commission. So because of their falling out, they were like, okay, we need to exterminate the Asian people. And so they were making all those avian flus and pig flus and releasing them in Asia. And so that's part of the reason why they got into masking culture is because they had all of these viruses that specifically targeted Asian people. So they've gotten much more used to just having these pandemic type things all the time because the plutocrats were constantly sending things at them because the European plutocrats they have this belief in what's called the yellow pearl, P-E-R-I-L, as in like not a good thing, and because they were afraid because the Asian people are smarter than them, and there's more of them, and so that makes them scared. Anyway, so that's why they were doing that, and COVID is just the latest in a long line of the same old stuff. Like I know initially before MSM quashed it, the mainstream media, there was a lot of scientists coming out and saying, yeah, this is an engineered virus between HIV and SARS, and even it has some of the Ebola stuff in it, and it's has all the same signatures as that Ebola virus that came out that was a hybrid of Ebola and HIV in Africa. And people were like, and then people were like, is this your opinion? He's like, no, this is the science. This is when you look at it, that's what it looks like. I'm just telling you what it looks like. I don't know about the politics. And then the politics shut it down. And Facebook doesn't let anyone post those links anymore.
Yes.
But yeah, so it is what it is. And so that's one of my main concerns with the COVID thing. Even though I know that the lockdown is engineered, but the fact that it is technically an airborne form of HIV, it's just not as effective as regular HIV. So, for instance, it actually enters the cells of the T cells, just like HIV does. but apparently it does not effectively reproduce usually. So
I haven't heard that.
I'll
yeah, look into that.
Yeah, you can look into it. Yeah, so that was my main concern, and like, so COVID is genuinely a bad thing because they engineered it so well, but then they want to deny the fact that they engineered it, and so it's kind of like then people are like, oh, you're denying it's engineered, so it's just a flu. And they're like, no, it's worse than the flu. It's like, so it's engineered? They're like, no, it's not engineered. So it's
yeah, I think that can sometimes be confusing, because there's a lot of evidence that came from the lab in Wuhan.
Yeah.
But and some people say like it's sort of like gain of function research trying to make viruses that are more deadly. But
how did it get to Wuhan? Is that it was sent from a U.S. lab? To Wuhan.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of scientists that were calling to stop that kind of research in the United States, but then
they just moved it to
Wuhan. And Fauci is heavily involved with it.
Yeah, you probably saw pandemic too, right? So he has a lot of financial gain from the vaccines and stuff. That's why they don't want any treatments. They don't want to admit that any treatments work, because then they won't be able to make money on the vaccines. And also, I heard from someone that there's too many of us and not enough plutocrats to control everybody. So they can't wage war against everybody else, because that wouldn't work, because you'd have to get regular people to wage war with other regular people who are not also plutocrats. So their whole idea is to brainwash them into accepting these vaccines, which is basically the same as like hitting someone with a stick, but now you're poking them with a needle and injecting them with poison, like the vaccine they had in America had 80 to 100% people with side effects.
And the Moderna vaccine?
Moderna, yeah.
Yes,
and it gets worse every single
trial,
with every injection.
Trial.
And they're planning 4 injections a year forever.
Yeah, I think that's really a lot of people think when you get the vaccine it's going back to normal, but
no,
I don't think that's the case. I think when I just saw an article that said the criteria they're using to define success in the trials is just that it will lower the symptoms of sort of common cold flu symptoms from like a certain level to a little bit lower mild symptoms.
Oh, for COVID?
Yes.
But how did they know?
Well, they're just going to measure like 2 groups of people, and
some that don't get it, some that do get it?
Yeah, the placebo group and the vaccine group, and see if it reduces the symptoms of it. But it doesn't measure whether it's reducing hospitalizations or whether it actually helps deaths, and it appears it probably won't do that.
Yeah, because from what I read, the vaccine is worse than the disease in a bunch of these cases, because there's lots of a lot of people, a high percentage of people who get COVID don't have any symptoms. It's not 80 to 100% of people that have symptoms, but 80 to 100% of people have vaccine symptoms, so obviously it's worse than COVID.
Yeah, I think we could say it might be designed from a lab, but I think, and some people have said it's like a bioweapon, but they also said if it was a bioweapon, it's a bad one, because most people recover it, I think.
Yeah, it's just that it's actually very difficult to make an effective bioweapon, just because of a lack of understanding of how the world works. So there's this humanists. They believe that everything is they worship humans, and then they discount everyone else, including animals and nature and cognitive phenomena. So they have a very narrow kind of worldview, but it was a reaction. It was a religion that started during the French Revolution as a reaction to Catholic oppression. So it had its kind of purpose for a while, but scientists are now finding that fundamentally reality is it's all mind, because some people think that mind and matter are separate, but if they were separate, then they couldn't interact. So whatever it is, it's one thing, but because we have consciousness, and you can tell that consciousness exists because you're conscious, and thus everything is consciousness, because everything is the same kind of thing. So basically, the rocks and this table has its own consciousness, and what's happening is that there's these photons flowing in between us, which are communication. So that's what's happening. It's a form of communication, is the light. And there's the communication when I put my hand here, then the table is telling me I'm here, and that's why I can't put my hand through this table, is because it's telling me I'm here. No, that's it, that's where I am. And so everything is a form of communication in mind, and everything is an entity, and so people will only so disease exists to give people an opportunity to exit their lives. So if they are, say, unhappy with their lives. And so, for example, in those for-profit nursing homes where a lot of people died, they were not being taken care of properly, because for-profit nursing homes are notorious for having maltreatment of their patients, because they're always trying to cut corners, and they only get one diaper every 12 hours, even if they poo in it in the first half hour or whatever. And it's really horrendous, the conditions they're kept under. So yeah, maybe a lot of those people didn't have much of a will to live, and so the first thing that came along, and it doesn't matter what it was, they died.
Yeah, it's sad.
But for regular healthy people that have a will to live, it's not really a problem.
Yeah,
and it doesn't matter what it is or how you make it, it's still not going to be a problem.
I think it's sad that how the nursing homes went, but I think a lot of people might have even died from loneliness as well, I think, because
quite possibly.
That's well known that when people are really old, that can be a factor, and because a lot of people died alone, and that's sad. Like the relatives weren't able to go and see them.
Yeah, I heard that in New York, they also made special laws saying that if someone has COVID, then they can't be denied from a nursing home.
Yeah, they sent COVID patients from the hospital that had it to the nursing home.
I know, it's just, that was, obviously that increased the death count, so, and that was intentional.
Yes, and I heard that ventilators too are not the best way to treat
Oh no,
them.
yeah. Ventilators kill people.
Yeah.
It's well known, like especially those invasive ones. So they're
not giving
lots
them
of doctors
oxygen.
say this is the wrong protocol, and so they were putting people on ventilators, and it was killing them.
Yeah, and I thought someone has said that an oxygen mask would be like better way to treat them.
Yeah, if they needed it. Yeah.
And then there's lots of treatments like hydroxychloroquine and that it was there's a war on it, but I think that if they were used widely, there might have been a lot less death.
Yeah, for
Especially
sure.
in the United States. The people are always comparing here to the United States and saying, I feel like we did a good job because they have 250,000 deaths or something. But I've heard some people, doctors there, saying that they're counting patients who probably have COVID-19 on the death certificate, and it's not really a confirmed case.
Yeah.
And I've also heard that the all-cause mortality has not risen from an average over the last few years. So if you look at the deaths from any type of disease or accident.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well, Bill Gates did put on his 2019 or whatever reading list, How to Lie with Statistics.
Oh, really?
It was one of his books that he recommended to people. how to lie with statistics.
And it was talking about how to do it.
Yeah, how to lie with statistics. And this is basically what he's accomplished with COVID is if you add in a bunch of unrelated stuff onto it and make it look, bigger than it actually is. Like you're saying, all case fatality rates are not increased, then they're just including it when people are dying for other reasons.
Yes, I think, there was a CDC kind of information at one time that said that only 6% were from COVID alone, and then the other ones had maybe 2.5 comorbidities, like an average.
Yeah, the majority of them had comorbidities, like.
And that's why I said the government doesn't seem to care about health. They're not addressing those comorbidities, so the epidemics of chronic disease, because it's a profit-based healthcare system
in America.
And, even
in
here,
Canada, it's non-profit.
I know it's non-profit, but
is a lot
but
better.
Still, it's better. But the doctors still have an incentive to see as many patients as they can because they're paid
true.
per visit.
Yeah. That's why our visits are like 3 minutes. I don't know if your doctor's any different, but
I don't have a doctor. I kind of fit.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Our GP in Toronto, we would show up, and even if we had a problem or something, he'd just be like, "Looks fine to me. Go home." And so it's like his job was just giving us a minute or two of reassurance, and then if we had to stay because we needed to change the kid's diaper or something, he would just leave the room. After his 3 minutes were up.
Yeah.
And then it's the same thing here, but I think we get a whole 5 minutes instead of 3 minutes. So
and then I think the doctors a lot they just listen to what they're told when they go to medical school. So some of the
and a lot of that
information
is
they're getting
exactly corporate funded.
Yeah.
Like they're not taught about nutrition.
No.
They're not taught about mental health.
Or what's in the vaccines. Anything like that.
Yeah. It was I believe it was the Rockefellers who invented who took over the vaccination thing, and then when they found that it was causing cancer, what they did is they're like, we can make money on this. Let's open a cancer research institute, and so they found amongst lots of doctors and many spiritual people, they know what the cure for cancer is. It's forgiveness. Because basically what happens is that if people are angry and resentful, either resentful to themselves or other people, and then they hold it in their body, it turns into tumors. And then if they forgive those people or themselves, then they go into remission. And there's lots of cases, and the statistics show that 60% of people who have cancer have extreme forgiveness problems. And how do they treat them at the Rockefeller thing? By giving them things that will give them cancer, such as radiation therapy and chemotherapy, both of which cause cancer. So,
Yes, even if you look at the Rockefeller Foundation website, it says that we founded the modern field of public health. So I think in the pandemic too, they said about how they took over the medical schools and removed natural forms of healing from the books and stuff.
Yeah, that's the one good thing that China managed to do is to bring back natural remedies to World Health Organization. But yeah, that's unfortunately one of the very few things that are good that they've done.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, those re-education camps, they're just mostly torture people until they agree with the party line, and then they're moved up to where they repeat the party line for almost several years, and then they're released provisionally on probation, where they are monitored to see if they will continue saying the party line, and if they diverge from the party line, it's back to the re-education camps. like especially you probably heard of the Falun Gong.
No, I don't think.
Oh, well, maybe it was a little before your time.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay, so back in the 90s, Falun Gong was very popular in China. They had like over 70 million adherents. And then the leader of Falun Gong, he was teaching in North America or something at the time. And he refused to raise the cost of his classes. And the Qigong people in the government-controlled Qigong Association told him he had to do it. And so he just left the Qigong Association. And then they were like, oh, okay, so we're going to exterminate all of your supporters now. And so they made this whole campaign, destroying the credibility of Falun Gong. And for a while, Falun Gong supporters were like, what are you guys doing? And then at some point, 10,000 of them went to make a peaceful appeal, saying that, this is wrong, that you guys are, saying all this bad stuff about Falun Gong when it's completely just lies and disinformation. And then the government was like, wow, we've got too many Falun Gong people. So then they put them in re-education camps where they were tortured with by being forced to stand in different postures, not being allowed to sleep, electrocuted, and put into forced labor, where they had to meet a quota, which was very, very high. And if they didn't meet the quota, they weren't allowed to sleep that night. And then they had to continue sewing the next, or knitting the next day, for instance. Like there's Jennifer Zhang. And so she managed to get out after a year of torture, because she went with the party line, because that's the only way to get out, is to agree to the party line on paper. They don't really care if you actually do. At least at that time, they didn't actually care. And then she fled the country because she knew how to speak English and she had contacts in Australia and stuff. So because of the success of this Falun Gong thing, they have expanded it to include anyone who's religious. So Christian people and Muslim people. So now they're and there's millions of those as well. And so they round them up. Anyone who has a beard, anyone who prays, and there's like some other ones. So if you have any of those, then you go straight to the re-education camps.
In China.
In China, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
no, I think that it's the warning, because I think Bill Gates' sort of agenda is kind of bringing more surveillance in a more authoritarian type of society like China.
Yeah. So one of the examples is that the world followed China's example in how to deal with the pandemic. And China is an extreme socialist country. It's like, if you're going to follow their example, you're going to be just like them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, China's already back to normal, and it seems like the reason they're delaying it here is that they want to use the pandemic to kind of, once people get a vaccine, they want to implement systems that people can prove the vaccine, like health passports and
that's the Bill Gates thing, right?
And more types of surveillance so that people's ID is connected to
their banking information
and stuff.
And they want to phase out
currency,
cash. Yeah.
And then that will allow them to clamp down more like China, but around the world, and suppress dissent.
Exactly.
Because if people are dissenting, they can shut up their bank account or something.
Yeah.
I think it's very concerning.
It is very concerning. You're right.
And how do you feel about what we need to do to start the agenda of mandatory vaccines?
So, I think the main thing we need to do is to make edible food forest communities with a circular economy.
Yeah.
Because basically right now civilization is collapsing and our bread baskets have finite time. So all throughout history, whenever there's been climate change, it's been synonymous with famine. So usually, so say for instance, the few climate change events that happened before were when there was a cooling of a degree or two.
Yes.
And so a cooling leads to extra rain, and so it can wash away the soils, and then things don't ripen, and people can't what do you call it? Grow foods at the same altitudes and stuff like that, or the same latitudes, and so that's how it causes famine. Now, when you raise the temperature, like what's happening now, what happens is you get less rain, and so you actually get desertification, and so you get more forest fires, and less rain, and the groundwater doesn't get recuperated. And the scientists show that about 8 times more soil is washed away than accumulates whenever someone plows the field.
Yeah.
And so they were saying like a few years back that there was only 60 harvests left, and there's a lot of places that have 2 or more harvests a year. So that could be like as little as 30 years of soil left.
Yeah.
Before you're cultivating on subsoils, which won't grow food.
I think it's largely industrial agriculture.
Exactly.
and the use of pesticides and nitrous oxides.
But there's no other way of feeding cities
other than industrial agriculture.
Industrial agriculture, because like say for instance, if you had a food forest, then you would need to have humans to go into the food forest and pick the fruit, and that's really expensive. Right now with industrial agriculture, you have one farmer on 10,000 hectares with this like massive machine that's as big as that building or bigger, harvesting everything. And that's the only way you could feed a city, because you need to have such a huge ratio of like one farmer to 10,000 people.